Well, yeah. Well, so obviously, right, step one when it comes to like renovating for profit is start early and be prepared. Time is money. I think that's the one thing that a lot of people kind of underappreciate. Like they we've done hundreds of these now.
200 or 300, yeah.
Yeah, since back in the day. Like we started, in 2008, actually flipping our own houses. And what people don't realize, and especially now that like the cost of money has become more, time is money even more so, right? Like back in the day, we were buying at 3, 4, 5% that we were paying interest-wise. Now we're paying a point and 9 or 10%. So as the longer you hold these projects, the more it kind of eats into your profit. So just knowing that that is a big aspect of it. You want to make sure we have our teams and we're running through the jobs and doing them right, but you want to make sure things are not sitting, especially for an extended period of time where, all of a sudden a week went by and nothing happened. That could cost you $1,000, $2,000, depending on what the size of the job is and how much money you've borrowed.
And going back to that, like getting time to prep, ideally you want 2 to 4 weeks to close. In this market, it's really hard to get that when it's a good deal. The 2 deals that we bought yesterday, we closed in 5 days. So with a $100,000 EMD and really quick turn because they were competitive situations. But in an ideal world, you're getting 2, 3, 4 weeks, so you can kind of lay out a game plan before you close and start your cost of money. On that note, Tom, like one of the projects we bought right now, we bought for $825. We're essentially building a new home and hope to sell it for $2.2 million. When we were under contract and negotiating the contract to ratify, our cost of money went from 5.25 to 8.25. So it completely changed the underwriting of that deal because it was like a 10-day negotiation roughly. Mm-hmm. So time is money. That just went from a $6,000 a month carry cost to $8,000 a month during those negotiations. So knowing your numbers going into it is what we'll talk about today.
Yeah. And obviously, do your research on features and finishes in your market. Build what sells, not the home of your dreams. Get in, get out, get paid, and repeat, right? And I think that's one thing that so my dad is our project manager, right? He works with Corey on the day-to-day, flipping houses and building what we want to build. He's sick and tired of the black and white. Well, you know what, Dad? Black and white still selling.
He's trying to talk.
And until that stops selling, that's what we're going to start. That's what we're going to keep building.
He wants to go back to khaki, brown. He wants brown and tan everywhere. Brown and tan every day, all day. Yeah. But ultimately, build what sells, right? You're not building your custom home. You're not building your dream home. You're building to the market. So for us realtors, that's a little bit easier because we have access to the MLS. If you're an investor, you don't have access to the MLS. You have Zillow, Redfin, HomeSnap, whatever tools. Get with your realtor. Build to your top 5 comps. You're not building your own home. And so when we buy a house, even depending on zip code, we have packages. We have 4 different packages. Riley's seen them all at this point as our photographer. But ultimately, we have a package for a certain price point in a certain zip code that works. And we just build to what the market will buy. So that's why we love being realtors and investors is that we get to see the feedback, the showings, the open house feedback. The market tells us what they want, and then we get to kind of put that product back out to the market. If you're not full-time realtors, literally just go spend an hour on the MLS, on Zillow Realtors, see what the neighbors that have hit the kind of set the bar have done, and just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and I do think a good rule of thumb is just look at what new construction is doing, right? New construction is the pinnacle. A renovation is not going to be more than new construction. They are kind of setting the bar, and they have designers, they have everybody that's doing that for them. They're making sure they're staying top of mind and very cutting edge of what is selling and fashionable. That is not, if I spent any time doing that, I am losing money because that is not my wheelhouse. I'm trying to learn a new skill that is not.
We wouldn't sell a project if you designed them, to be honest.
Exactly.
We'd be in trouble.
Exactly. So we have designers that
We'd
do
be here
that.
Raising money tonight.
Yes, and on top of that though, that's why we go and walk every new construction home around projects that we're doing, whether we're building a new home or not, even if we're flipping something, what are the new homes doing that is what the market is thinking is the new trends and stuff like that. And then you start implementing that here and there in your own project. It's not this isn't something where it's this has to be super unique, right? You want to appeal to the masses, and most of these production builders and people that are building more than one home at a time, they know what sells. So don't try to recreate the wheel, and that's a very easy way to just kind of scale your design without spending too much time doing it.
Or even simpler than that, if you have a house, and let's just say Annandale, set up a search, either with your realtor. You should be working with a realtor at this point if you don't have one on the investment side. But if you don't, set up a search on Redfin, Zillow, HomeSnap, whatever, and walk those properties at the open house to make sure you're designing the market, you're building to the market. Most people actually don't do that. They just get very excited about the design phase and they kind of let the budget go wild. And then at the end of the day, they're like, well, how did I break even? Because you spent 150 grand when you should have spent 100 essentially.
Yep. And then obviously number two, like, right, get a design and drafting, help for plans and permits. This can take weeks in some areas. So, I mean, Corey is honestly our in-house construction guru. So when it comes down to like plans and permits and stuff like that, like that's not something that you're necessarily, especially when you're closing in a week, that we're able to get a jump on, right? Like in an ideal world, we can close in a month or so, so we can get all of our T's crossed and I's dotted, but it doesn't necessarily work like that. So once you close on it, you start paying the interest and all that stuff, you're incurring costs, but this is a very important part because the design, the layout, the permits, all that stuff takes a lot of time, especially with the counties. Like what we've seen is anywhere between 1 to 3 months, depending on the scope of the job, to be able to actually break ground and start working on something. If it's a easy rehab or you're just opening up a wall for a kitchen or you're adding up top and bumping off the back or scraping and building, it's a big difference. Like how do you kind of control that?
So I would say for interior renovations, you're anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks if you're doing an interior reno. Like obviously contractors in the room know that as well. If you're going to an addition, you're probably looking at 2 to 4 months before you can break ground, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And if you're going new construction, just call it 6 months. So again, knowing those general timelines and going into it is helpful. So, I mean, we've been at this for a long time. And fortunately, we have permit runners, we have contractors, we have draftsmen, and we know which jurisdictions navigate how quickly or how slow. But essentially, like the houses, I was in Europe the last 2 weeks and I came back to Sean's text that we bought 2 houses this week. And I'm like, sweet, okay, let's do this. So I saw them yesterday at 10? We bought them at 1, and then we're working on floor plans on the fly. Because fortunately for these 2 houses, we've done this general floor plan 10 or 15 times, so it's not rocket science for us. But if we didn't, we'd be there tomorrow morning measuring, carving out. You bring in a permit runner is what we bring in, and then you start covering up the floor plan. But in an ideal world, we have a 2 to 3 week lead time on that so that we can come up with a game plan from a budget to a layout to the selection sheet or finishes before we close, so that the day in an ideal world we close on Monday, we're submitting for permits on Tuesday or Wednesday. So that's when you line it up perfectly. On these ones, because we had to close in 5 days, and I saw them yesterday, we're gonna submit for permits next week for one and probably 3 weeks for the other one. So that's cost of money that will then impact our bottom line.
Yep.
But 2 to 4 weeks is really realistic if you can get that. If you're off market, you might be the realtors in the room know you can get 4 to 6 weeks. If you're on the market, it's a good deal. If you're not closing in 2 weeks, you're probably not gonna get that deal.
Yep. And then obviously, what step 3 here is ensure permits, contractors, dumpsters, and utilities are ready for the day you close, if not before. Now, kind of going back to what Corey just said, right, you're not always able to line up permits and everything like that ready to go like the day you close. You know, utilities, stuff like that, contractors, we know who we're going to work with. We kind of have 3 contractors depending on the scope and scale of the job and really kind of where they're at from a pipeline perspective. We're able to allocate them as we need and, you know, play to their strengths. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, again, partnering with the Design Pro guys, like these are boys that we've known from 30 years ago, right? So like, I know Steven or Jeff can go and knock out a certain job for us and they're better at the bigger jobs. Whereas if we need somebody that's just gonna do, you know, very light cosmetics, we might not need them. So it's just a matter of like finagling that. But I think one of the biggest things is outside of the permitting, you can pretty much have everything lined up day one, and then it's just a matter of you're kind of mercy of the jurisdiction that you're working in, to be honest with you, you know. And one of our guys, the guy that we work with, Skylar, he was a former plan reviewer at Fairfax County, so he knows a lot of the people and he worked in the different jurisdictions. So he has really been a big value add to us because he just knows people that work in every county and jurisdiction. So he's able to kind of prod them along and get things moving faster than we would, or we would be going there ourselves trying to be the, you know, squeaky wheel that gets the grease type of thing. And like that's what you have to do unless you have someone that you're working with, and that's been a big value add over the years.
Yeah, we've been working with them for about a decade now. But also, like if you're just doing one, you might not have the budget to pay $4,000 for a permit runner or $3,000 for a permit runner. So when you first start out and you're looking to do your first or your second or third project, you may have more time to chase those leads than money. And as you get more projects and more experience, that starts to shift, just like running a real estate business, right? You might have more money than time, or it starts to balance out a little bit. So we 100% see the value in paying an expert to run these permits, to navigate the permit process, so that we can do what we do well. But if I'm starting out my second, third, fourth job, like we're running permits, we're running tile, we're picking up stuff from Home Depot. So there is somewhat of a transition period. But the biggest thing and the simplest thing that most people overlook is literally connecting utilities. So again, if you're buying a house off market, you don't have an agent, you don't have somebody advising you, you have a seller who's unrepresented, you forget about connecting utilities. Utilities get shut off. Now you have gas, water, electricity. You might be a week before you get them reconnected. And by the way, if they're shut off, you have to meet them there because they won't turn it on when someone's not there. So that's a very simple, we have a checklist of when we buy a home, all the things that have to happen. But if it's your second or third project, you don't have that checklist laid out. Very simple for realtors, but if you're not in this every day, like we've had plenty of jobs that contractors like, hey, I'm here to demo, I have no power. Or I'm here to do this and I have no water. And we're like, shit, what happened there? Well, how did we drop the ball? You sure? And we're like, oh, we never called it in. Right? So now we have a process. When we first started, you're just kind of figuring it out. But that, very simply put, make sure you transfer utilities into your name the day of settlement so that you can start demo that next day. We've bought houses at 11 a.m. and started demo at 12 p.m. before, but you have to have that process, lined up.
Yep.
Or that could cost you $1,000, $2,000 and just idle time.
Yep. And then obviously, major step number 2 is renovate it right. And within that, right, like introduce yourself to the neighbors and give them your contact info. I cannot minimize this, or stress it enough. Honestly, my dad is our project manager, right? So, and it's a beautiful thing. I work more on the sales team. Corey works more on our deals and manages my dad because I don't want to be managing my dad. It's like herding cats on a daily basis with that guy. But it would not make family dinners on Wednesday very pleasant if I was doing that. So, but one thing that I will say he is great at is he literally will go knock on the doors and say, hey, just so you know, our team just bought your neighbor's house at 123 Main Street. We're going to be starting demo. And he kind of gives them a game plan of this is going to be hopefully a 2-month job, a 6-month job, or we're going to scrape it and build. It's going to be a year job. And he literally makes friends with everybody. And he says, if there's any issues at all, please call me. Do not call, don't call anybody else. Like, you do not want your neighbors calling the county, calling anybody outside of, hopefully you are that funnel and dealing with it. Like, that is a huge piece, and that's something that we've done a fairly good job of dealing with. Now, not everybody listens, right? Like, there are people that you'll come to find out there's been many situations where the neighbor is super pissed that we bought the house because they thought they were going to buy the house at a less price than we bought it for, or whatever reason they thought that they had it lined up. Because I've been mowing this grass for 30 years thinking that I was going to get this deal when they passed. Well, we got it,
or they
and then they just want to make your life live in hell.
Inherit the property sometimes, not even buy the property.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll give you two wins and 1 loss from this alone. So there used to be, again, we started out, Sean and I would go knock on, it's like 10 by 10. In real estate, you knock on all the doors, introduce yourself, here's my card. Don't call the city, don't call the cops, call me, right? So now Tim does that, which is great. And he can talk, he'll spend half his day talking to neighbors.
Hey, Dad, we still need you to work though, bro.
So a win is we bought a house here in Falls Church City because we've completed a project across the street from it. Because he got to know the neighbors over a 7-month period of time, he found out that one of the other neighbors was under contract with a builder, who's a reputable builder in Falls Church, backed out when the market stalled, got cold feet. So by him knowing the neighbor, he said, hey, I don't know which house, but it's one of these 3 are gonna sell, and they just fell out of contract. So then I went and knocked on all 3 doors, introduced myself. We bought a house that we're actually in the concrete phase of right now to do a huge addition based on those initial conversations talking to neighbors. So that's a huge win. That project should net us between $200,000 and $250,000. Had we not talked to the neighbors, we wouldn't have gotten that inside tip, right? That's a win. 2 losses from this and not doing this is we have a Google review right now on our real estate company, Dutko Ragen page, From a next door neighbor that we have talked to 2 times and was completely happy with it. We painted the house. He put a Google review on our website, our Google page, basically saying we destroyed the house. We not only compromised the architectural integrity,
structural integrity.
we also compromised the structural integrity by painting the home. A 1 0-star review. We had 49 5-star reviews. Now we have 1 0-star review. And again, like had we had maybe a more recent conversation about, hey, just an FYI, we're going to paint the home, which you have no control over, by the way. And here's the color, maybe that would have prevented him. So we challenged this review saying it's false. And Google said, no, we're going to leave it up there for a while. So that, and then when 4 or 5 years ago, we were building a home during COVID. So again, like 3 years ago, I guess, Gordon and there were some disgruntled neighbors. We were doing the construction, called the cops twice on us. And Tim had talked to 7 of 8 neighbors, but did not connect with us one, who every other 7 neighbors said, this person you don't want to talk to.
She was a recluse, like didn't leave her house in the last 10 years.
She's the Karen in the neighborhood, right? So just, this lady's gonna be challenged. She called the cops on us because a neighbor came to dig out rose bushes. So there was literally 4 police cars there. I'm like, you're in a good neighborhood when 4 police cars show up over rose bushes? So I was like, I feel really good about our investment here. But our phone was just blowing up. We had like 14 missed calls on a Saturday, and it was Fairfax County Police. The neighbors were literally arguing in our front yard over rose bushes. We had told one neighbor, go for it, they're gonna get demo, the house is coming down. And this lady apparently wanted the rose bushes or didn't like the neighbor or something. Fast forward a month later, she actually called OSHA on us because she said that our house demo was too dusty. And she was working from home inside of her home office, and she had a hard time breathing because of the dust. Cost us $30,000.
And we had a potential fine looming over our head. And for the record, we're not home builders. So like this was a home build that we were doing because the deal was that good to do it. And we did not demo correctly per OSHA's guidelines for asbestos. Thank God when we had it tested, lead-based paint and asbestos, thank God the levels came in just below where they needed to. But we had a month of potentially $25,000 a day fine for 30 days. $25,000 a day.
No, they came in above the level.
Did they?
Yeah, let me tell the story.
Yeah, I'm not the detail guy, but I just remember $25,000 a day for 30 days. I was like, buddy, we're in trouble. If this hits,
cool,
we're out of here.
No big deal. So now you know our builders sometimes file bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But essentially what happened is we demoed the house and we demoed a shed. We had permits for everything. We actually hired the biggest demolition and site prep company in the area. What we didn't do is stop to test the house and the shed for lead-based paint before we demoed it. So because she called, which she had no idea we hadn't done that, she was just having a bad day, we basically brought in sprinkler systems and said, okay, if it's dusty, then we're going to sprinkle the entire property so there's no dust, right? It's not airborne. We're gonna tap the dust down. She didn't like that, so she called again. Then the sprinklers were too loud. But ultimately what happened is the house came back free of asbestos and lead-based paint, but the shed had lead-based paint in it. Because the demo company had placed the shed debris in the house rubble, we had to properly dispose of the entire area, which was 22 dumpsters at $1,400 a piece because they had to drive them down to Richmond. So it was about a $30,000 actual cost, but it would have been up to
25 grand a day.
So our one thing became meeting the inspector there every day to make sure he was happy with the disposal, because I realized that was $3,000 an hour worth of work to make sure he was happy. And then real estate became a secondary thing for that week or two until we got it all out.
Yeah.
But again, it just goes back to the importance of like knowing the neighbors, knocking on all the neighbors' doors, making friends so that they call you, not the county or the police.
And on top of that, just aside from like mitigating potential risk, like you also never know what neighbors might be thinking of selling or doing something else. And there could be the next deal on the same street or around the corner that you never would have known had you not knocked on those doors.
And so again, if you want to be in this business for a long time, consistency is everything. We do a really good job at being creative and a really bad job at being consistent historically. So a house we'll show you here in a few, we just closed on Hickory, and 5 years ago we literally bought, renovated, and sold the house next door. So there's 2 duplexes. These ones are not sharing a wall, but they're literally next door neighbors. We talked to the neighbor who was a retired architect 5 years ago. He was not ready to sell. We made friends with him, but we did not do a good job of staying in touch with him. 5 years later, we bought that same house next door and flipped the house, sold it for $100,000 more than we did the neighbor. But had we stayed in touch with just that neighbor for the next 5 years, he probably would have called us. Instead, there's a listing agent involved. It went to market. It got bid up. We probably could have gotten it $30,000, $40,000 below what we paid for it, had we just been very consistent with our mailers, with our marketing, with our contacts, and stay in touch with the neighbors for the next 10 years, because they already know you. Hopefully they like you and trust you. We just didn't do it long enough.
Yeah.
So again, if you're looking for deals where deal flow is tight, those little incremental things can make a big difference.
Oh, for sure.
Quick question, not to
Yeah.
get sidetracked,
Yeah.
but just you got me thinking with the neighbors. Have you guys ever dealt with issues like, say, homeless people or people coming onto your property,
Yeah.
party, God forbid, do drugs, whatever?
Yep.
How have you handled that? And
Invite
do
me
you
to that
do
party.
anything in terms of security to sort of try to tighten things up?
So yes to all three.
Okay.
Yeah, yes to all three.
Okay.
Now, so we have one guy, a friend of ours, or more of like a guy that we know. He does flips in DC.
Okay, I was gonna say, where are you going with this one?
Yeah, but he does flips in DC.
Stop recording, Riley.
He used to be an undercover narcotics cop, and he does flips in DC, and he'll take them in the seediest area everywhere. He, because of his days on the police force, he literally has people that he'll put up throughout the demo phase to make sure squatters don't come in. Like people that are on the streets that he still like mentors and has a relationship with. So that's a different level. We don't do that, but he does that, and that works very well for him, to be honest with you. In terms of what we have seen.
I mean, we've had AC units ripped off probably 4 times in the last 2 years. AC compressors either stripped for copper or just stolen. I had a listing 10 years ago where squatters were in there a couple times, where they would break into a vacant listing and do that, and then we'd find it a couple days later, call the police, they get involved. Nowadays, honestly, cameras are so much better, technology is so much better, it's easier to catch. We had a rental property in Hampton Roads that was a complete gut renovation. We bought it 10 years ago, tripled the value of the house, had it under contract. AC unit got stolen 3 times. So after the second time, we bought a Nest camera, third time, and a cage. And then we ultimately found out that Home Depot sells battery backup Nest cams. So on construction sites, it's challenging because you don't have Wi-Fi, and a lot of times you don't have power. But now they actually, for $500 or $600, sell a package that has built-in Wi-Fi, battery, and camera. So we bought that, and we actually caught the guy the third time to come back. It was literally jumping a 6-foot fence that was dead-bolted to steal $40 worth of copper. And we've also done in the past, we put a sign out saying, hey, if you got this far, text us, we'll Venmo you $50. Because you're stealing $4,000 of materials, and it's literally gonna get you $40, $50 worth of scrap. So we've dealt with all of those things. We try to buy properties in areas where we know that that's less likely to happen, but going back to your point, it's happened in PG County, Hampton Roads, DC, in Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, in our general area, City of Alexandria, or Falls Church, it's less likely to happen, but it does happen. But now technology makes it easier to combat it a little bit.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. What's that?
Got this far, tell them.
They didn't text us. He probably didn't have a phone, if I'm being honest. But and the guy that stole it 3 times, we found out he was a crackhead.
But again,
And he was homeless and just knew that it was a vacant home with a for sale sign in the yard. So then we tried pulling the for sale sign down, and he still came back.
But technology is great. One of our friends, literally right around the corner from my house, is building 2
Sketchy neighborhood.
$2.5 million houses, on Prosperity Avenue in Fairfax. And kids broke in, but they have cameras, so they notified the cops because kids broke in and broke windows and stuff like that. They had cops on them within 10 minutes, and they got the kids. They were high school kids from Woodson High School, and ended up now they're in a lawsuit. They're suing the parents, and the parents lawyered up. But if it wasn't for having a camera there, they would have had no clue.
So it happened once, and there was no camera.
Yep.
And so they put the same cameras, the Nest Cam package, on both poles, a tree and a power pole, and caught them instantaneously.
Yeah.
Got all 3 arrested.
It was a little overboard because there was actually a helicopter in the air, and I'm like, what's going on? And it was about that. I'm like, some high school kids running through a new build.
It's
All right,
Steve's
the mean
neighborhood.
streets of Fairfax,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, your land value is very safe when that happens.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah.
But again, technology makes it easier. But yeah, it's something you deal with. So like again, like there's tons of websites now. You can go look at crime reports, crime rates, and see that's part of the equation. So you just want to know where you're buying.
So number 2 on this, in terms of like making sure your renovation's lock down your contractors with good scopes of work. We're going to be completely transparent here. We are not great at this. Like we don't have like written agreements necessarily with our top 3 contractors, right? We've been working with them for the last 10 years. We know, and we have emails back and forth and texts saying, hey, look, here's what we're doing. Here's the scope. Here's the budget. We all agree, and we've done it. Like we've done hundreds of deals together. With new contractors, we definitely make it way more, I would say, legal, right? When it comes down to, and I think that is like, don't do it how we do it necessarily. I would make sure that it's a tight agreement, because then it's not ambiguous. It's not oh, well, wait a minute. This included light fixtures, this included doorknobs, this included this. Like, there's always going to be some sort of give and take that people are asking for. And if it's not in the contract, if it's not in writing, as we say, it does not exist. So I think that is something that is very important. Again, we have some relationships that's more like a family bond with some of these people that we've worked with. So it's not that tight. It's not a very contentious relationship when it comes to that. But high level, make sure it's in writing.
Yeah, we hired a coach right now. It's $1,000 a week that does this at scale at 12 times the size of what we do it at. And he basically called us idiots for doing it that way. And he has a 6-page contract that he says he's gone to court 6 times with and has never lost. Ultimately, we only do that with people we've known for 5-10 years and have a working relationship with. But obviously, when you're starting any new relationship, you have a 4 or 5-page contract in writing. We do have a spreadsheet, and we have them initial and sign off and acknowledge a spreadsheet. So it's not like completely willy-nilly, but at the same time, it is not legally enforceable in a lot of areas. So if it went to court, which we could have taken a contractor to court last year in Alexandria for probably $40,000, we had a contract, but the change orders were not that tight. And so we knew, we've been at this long enough to know that probably wouldn't go to court and win. So we kind of took that on the chin. So again, it's a law of averages, but when you're starting out, get a good contract signed. And then as you get to do more, you can get a little looser, but you really shouldn't.
Yeah.
Where did you get legal advice for developing that 4-page contract, or did you just look one up?
So we actually, part of the coaching program on this particular one, we got access to his contract, which is in the state of Washington that's held up. And then we have David Robertson at UT looking at it for us as well. And then Jim Bittner just to kind of look over it. A lot of times, and he's even said this, if you meet, so you do your second flip, you meet a brand new contractor and you drop a 6-page legal contract, it's very one-sided in front of them. He's like, 70% of my contractors walk away, 30% say, okay, let's do it. So you're gonna lose some contractors that way, but you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, and if you don't get people to sign something, or they're unwilling to, make sure they do the work before you pay them. Like, don't be fronting any money. We've had people walk away on $30,000. They've demoed, and then we give them a second draw, because they need material money, and then nothing happens and they're gone. Like, we've lost a handful of money on that. Like, I would just make sure if you don't have an agreement signed, then make sure they do the work and then reimburse them for the work, not front the work for them.
Draw schedule.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, draw schedule.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that we've done 4 or 5 jobs with already. And so he basically was rolling through a lot of guys will start off really fast. And it's like, we're rolling, we've demoed, we're starting framing, I need the next draw. So we gave him a draw. From what he told us, his daughter had a brain aneurysm and was in ICU for a month. And so he kind of disappeared on us for a while. Understandably, life happens, right? That's a big deal. His daughter was 7 years old. And then he just never came back to the job and stopped responding to texts, emails, calls. All of a sudden, his subcontractors started calling us, hey, I need payment. And we're like, we've paid him more than we should have. And it turns out it was probably legitimate. And then he probably took the money that he owed the subs and put it towards medical bills. Mm-hmm. And we lost about $30K on that particular contract.
And on top of that, everybody has life circumstances that happen, right? Like, life happens to all of us. It's not easy. At the same time, we've had multiple contractors or certain tradespeople where it seems that their car breaks down every week, or a new cousin dies every week, or something. So it's like, all right, like, what are we actually doing here? Like, excuses, like, everybody's got one, and I get it. Like, life really does happen, not diminishing that at all. It happens to me too. But like, all right, like, if there's like a continuous type of thing, like, you know,
We have one
antenna goes up, like, all right, I probably should find a new HVAC guy at this point.
After 4 car accidents in a year, like you're uninsurable or you're lying, one of the two. You're still driving, so I don't know what's going on here.
And you might be driving while uninsured, which is fine.
You should have a full-time driver at this point.
Yeah. And then number 3, when it comes to like renovating right, is, you know, consider a GC. I think this is something that a lot of people overlook, right? The time value of money and management, right? A lot of people that get into flipping homes or doing some sort of real estate investing typically are doing it on the side of whatever their full-time job is. It's not necessarily like, okay, we're going full-time into real estate investing. It's more of a progression. And if you are trying to manage every trade and doing all of this, it truly is hurting cats. Design Pro is somebody that we work with that is a great general contractor. And to have a central like spot of like communication and management, like yes, you do pay a little more, right? You can probably save 10, 20, 25% tops in terms of like what your job is. But let's just say, in theory, you're getting a $100,000 renovation done. And it takes you 6 months to do that because you're playing point guard on every aspect of it, compared to paying them $120,000 to do it, and they're getting it done in 3.5 to 4 months. The time value of money, especially with the cost of money nowadays on a monthly basis, is a big difference. And you have somebody that is like the person there that's running it. So I think that's a big difference that a lot of people don't necessarily do. You know, for us, we have brought my dad in. He was a 30-year custom home builder we grew up in Falls Church. He's been, they used to build in Maryland. 8 years ago, we brought him like into our team, and he runs our jobs. However, he runs our subs. So he runs our subs and a couple general contractors that we work with. But then when we do jobs with the Design Pros of the world and other people, he's not touching those because he doesn't need to, because I have Steven, I have Jeff, I have TC, I have Andrew. I have the people that I need to talk to, and then they're gonna run the crews and make sure that it's done. And there's not that extra like level of management, and it tends to work very seamlessly. So I think that's one thing. I think a lot of people tend to think that hiring a GC is just going to dip into your bottom line, where it really doesn't, because truth of the matter is, like, time is money, like we talked about before. And secondly, they're able to navigate their trades way quicker than we can. Like, they know their plumbers, electricians, HVAC, framers, drywallers, painters, all that stuff. It's lined up, and they are operating at a much higher level than we do when we're trying to spot pick, hey, Olegario, I need you to come here this time. Hey, Julio, I need you to come here this time, whoever. And it works way more efficiently. So I think a lot of people think that hiring a GC is like is cost prohibitive, but it's definitely not in the grand scheme of things. And then do not get homeowner permits. Future liability will stay with you instead of the contractor that did the work. Pay whatever it costs to have contractors pull their own permits and handle all inspections.
Again, do as we say, not as we do. We also put permits often in our name as an LLC, not as the homeowner. I'd say 40% of the time we probably do that now. Most 60% of the time we pull it in the contractor's name. Again, you contractors know it costs a little bit more, there's a little bit more time, but the liability shifts back to the general contractor. We have one right now that it's, we had a huge rain a month and a half ago. It's a flooding situation. We have not even a client, someone that bought one of our homes that is now they're gonna come after us for $30,000 for waterproofing for a home that they bought 5 months ago, and the basement got wet. Luckily on that one, we have a general contractor who did the work. We hired Class A contractors and licensed subs for everything. So they're gonna come after us as the owner to say 5 months later, my basement got wet, it's your fault. We have a general contractor, we have permits, we have trades, we have everything covered. So we feel very good about that. But had we pulled all those permits in our name, now we're exposed because if you pull permits in your name, you act as the general contractor. So you really don't have any coverage. The liability kind of falls back to you. It's a little cheaper to do it that way. Sometimes in some jurisdictions it's faster to do it that way. But generally speaking, pull it in the general contractors, your plumbers, your master electrician, your HVAC. You're gonna pay more for it. You just need to budget that into your underwriting. But it just keeps the liability off of your side. Because if you're rehabber, investor that's done 5, 10, 20 deals, you really don't know what you don't know. The way I look at it, I'm an investor and I'm a realtor. I'm not a master electrician. I'm not a master HVAC. I'm not a master plumber. I'm not a structural engineer. I don't claim to be. So I'd rather hire those professionals to do that right, and then that way I can keep doing what I do well, even though you would save money by not doing it that way.
Yep. And then have a contingency budget, 10% minimum and 15% is better. I will say this is one thing that we really leaned into heavily, like back in the fall, right? When the market really started shifting. I mean, we've been a part of 300, 350 flips,
projects,
builds, and investments that we've done ourselves and have had ownership in. And we, 2 of them that we bought last April, May, when interest rates were still 3%, and then all of a sudden they jumped to 7%. The job took longer, the margin shrunk, and we had already bought them on tight margins. We ended up losing $8,000 on one and $92,000 on the other. We had never lost money really before, so losing $92,000 on a deal, for real, it was not fun. But what we learned from the coach that we just hired, listening to a podcast, he was like, hey, here's how I'm underwriting deals now in the fall. I am literally underwriting them at 5 to 10% depreciation. So if we think that it could sell for $1 million on the outsell today, I'm going to underwrite that at 5% less. So I'm going to say $950. If I think it's going to cost me $100,000 to do it, I'm going to add another 10%. So it's going to cost me $110. And if I think it's going to spend me 3 months to do it, I'm going to double that to 6 months. So basically, when you start moving those dynamics around and those factors and those variables, it really changes how your deal will perform at the end of the day. And Lord willing, right, we're wrong and the market keeps going and it just then outperforms it. But if not, you certainly have a contingency plan in place to where you've padded your numbers and you're sitting pretty and it's all right, I'm gonna be good at these numbers because I have really approached this deal very conservatively. And what I guess to fast forward is the deals that we bought in the fall that we took that approach with. When we came into the spring here, the spring market just ramped up and started roaring, and that just then padded our profit even more so. So then it became icing on the cake. We're oh my gosh, this was great. We bought it here when everybody was fearful because here's how we then underwrote them. And then the market, scaled up and bailed us out. So I think that's where it really kind of comes down to, again, knowing what's going on in the market and having a plan where it's all right, we don't know what's going to happen when we open this wall, right? Especially when you're first starting too. We have a good idea.
I would say when you first start, put 20 or 30% budget on top of that. So if you think for easy math, that's a $100,000 job, which used to be a big job. It's really not a big job anymore with construction costs. Put 20 or 30% on it because you don't know what's behind the wall. You don't know if there's plumbing. You don't know if it's a load-bearing wall or not. When you're first starting out, the more you do it, the better contractors you have around you, the more you learn. But is there ductwork? Is there plumbing? Is there electrical? Most of these houses that we buy in Delray, we have to complete, when we open up a kitchen wall, it's HVAC, it's load bearing, HVAC, and plumbing. So if you don't know that, you might underestimate that by $8,000 or $10,000 based on one wall. And not only you're relocating the HVAC, but you have to completely rework the ductwork in order to calculate the CFMs, which is the airflow to get upstairs. So you don't know those things when you're first starting out. So that might be a $12,000 change order on a $100,000 job. It's 12%. So our recommendation starting out, unless you're working with someone that really knows their numbers, either on the real estate side or the construction side, just put 20 or 30% on it. You're going to lose 80% of the deals, and that's okay. But you just want to protect yourself from losing money and kind of protect the downside.
Well, and that's what people say, right? Sometimes the best deals are the ones you walk away from. I honestly, that holds true with what we've done over the years. You don't want to just buy something to buy something. The numbers don't lie, and unless they actually fit within your pro forma, don't try to force them. We don't make the market, and because we put X, Y, or Z into it, doesn't make the market.
Market doesn't care.
The market doesn't care, and honestly, we deal with that, and I think that's the benefit of our team. We deal with that on the side of working with sellers, right? I have somebody in Fairfax. I told them we should go on at $850. They wanted to go on at $925. And I'm hey, look, we're going to sit on the market. We're not going to get any offers. I'm down to put you on at $925, but just remember this conversation. We're probably not going to sell, and we're going to need to drop the price at 21 days, and then another one at 42 days. and eventually we're going to get down here and we're going to sell. And they're like, well, you don't understand. I've put $250,000 into this house since I bought it in 1988. I said, okay. And she goes, and our kids grew up here. I said, okay. What does that have to do with market value? It doesn't matter. Like you literally, you get your profit when you buy your home and you realize it when you sell it. It has nothing to do what happened in between. Your budget could go from 100 to 150, and just because you put that extra 50 grand into it that you weren't planning to, has no impact on what it's actually worth once it's done. Like that's irrelevant. So, yeah.
So, do you approach those conversations with the same mentality, like from an educational standpoint?
Totally.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's like our biggest like differentiating factor in how we approach it. And that's like, here's what I would, listen, I get it, but like, if this were my home, here's what I would do, and I understand where you're coming from. But yes, we try to teach during that, and not everyone wants to hear it though.
And if we're at a,
yeah,
whether it's a listing appointment or an investment consult, right? So they're kind of one and the same. So if you go into a house, we look at it and say, is this an investment or is this a listing, right? The first 5 minutes, you've been at this long enough, you know, like, is this house a retail house that should go to market, or is this house beat up and nasty, right? And so sometimes it's marginal, so it could go either way. We'll open up our spreadsheet, bring a laptop, and say, hey, here's the numbers. Like, as an investor and as a realtor, here's what we're looking at. Your house is worth 5. In order for us to buy it, it needs, and to tell us it's 5 the way it is. In order to get to 750, which you think it needs 125 grand. Here's our spreadsheet, here's our numbers, here's what an investor is going to look at. That's just our opinion. We'll bring in 5 other investors that we worked with for a decade to give you another opinion to see if maybe we're off sometimes. But here is the number. Here are the numbers. Here's the reasonable return we expect to get, which is anywhere from 15 to 20% on our money. And they're like, because a lot of times people think you're lowballing them, right? And you're like, look, if you're putting a $700,000 bet in the market, whether it's stock market, go to MGM, or whatever, what would your expected return be? They're like, well, a lot. Like, okay, so if we're putting up $700,000 risk, we expect a 10% return, or $70,000. Is that reasonable? Would you do this for a 4% risk, knowing the market where we are? Rates just hit 7.5. So we'll kind of have that conversation. Now, if it's just strictly a seller, we'll have that conversation a little bit differently. But a lot of times if they're in the middle, is it a listing, is it an investment, or is it marginal? And so a lot of times we'll kind of lead them down the path. We'll buy it and we'll give you a guaranteed sale at 500. But to be honest, we think we can get you 599 with 35 grand in strategic improvements. If you're open to going down that path, we can net you 50 grand more by doing 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here's your net sheet. Here's another calculator that shows you that. It's your call. And at the end of the day, if the house doesn't sell, we'll still buy it for 500. So there's relatively no risk to you. We'll kind of have, but we'll open up the spreadsheet, the books, along with the comps, and we'll walk them through house by house, because everybody thinks their house is the nicest in the neighborhood. But you're like, yeah, your neighbor got $1 million, but they had 5 beds, 4 baths. You have 4 beds, 2 baths, and your basement's unfinished and leaking. Like, come on. You're not financeable, right? But sometimes sellers don't know what they don't know, so you kind of have to spend an hour educating them a little bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes you piss them off, and sometimes you make a friend and you gain that trust. Sheila gets calls all the time when we piss people off, but no, I'm just joking. Hopefully not.
No, but honestly, but I think we'd rather come from a place of contribution. It's like, man, I'm not trying to BS you here. Like, this is what it is, and it's like, here's what I would do for my home. Like, do whatever you want, but this, your house isn't worth this, or here's how we can help you maximize it. Like, to your point. And I think some people are receptive to that, and some people are just like, dude, I want $1 million. Wait, here's 450. Right. And they're like, well.
And sometimes it's, let's see what the market's willing to bear. Let's take it to market for 3 weeks. Hopefully we're wrong. Sometimes we are. We're not always right. But we think this is where you're going to fall on a net. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But if you go to market with these improvements, you back out commissions, closing costs, here's where your net will be. If you're looking to sell to an investor, they're not going to pay you a retail net. They're going to pay you somewhere in this range. So if you want ease, smooth, rent back, no closing costs, no nothing, you're going to pay somewhat of a premium on that. And then we'll tell them, like, hey, we're not nonprofits. We're not looking to gouge you, but we're also not a nonprofit. So we have to expect a reasonable return. Oh, and by the way, here's 3 projects last year that we bought that lost money, and here's the metrics on those as well. So once you sell this home, they're out.
Uh-oh.
Fire alarm? Yeah, it's the door open.
So, number 6, you or a partner or someone representing the owner should inspect the job site at least several times a week and daily during drywall, tiling, cabinet setting, and final punch out. Catching mistakes and fixing quality control issues early can save thousands, and even the best contractors need to know the owner is watching and cares about the quality and schedule. I would say this is one thing that we do a pretty good job of, but like, you know, sometimes things happen pretty quickly, and we've gone back and had to fix stuff multiple times.
Yeah. So I'm there once a week. Our foreman is there 3 times a week, if not daily, depending. We have 2 foremen now. One's there daily. Sean's dad's there probably 3 times a week, and I'm there once a week. So you want to catch mistakes. You want to kind of stay ahead of them as they're happening, so you don't have to come back and drop 20 grand to fix them later. That could be a kitchen layout. That could be the fridge hits the island. That could be the toilet is hitting the shower door. Like, there's all kinds of things that happen. You want to catch those as they're happening. Typically at the rough-in phase and the framing phase is the best place to catch those. Or you might walk in and be like, wow, I thought this primary bedroom felt great, but now that I'm in here, it's tiny. I want to move this wall over 2 feet, shrink the bath down. But being there not only, one, helps with quality control, but also shows the contractor that you're engaged and you're involved. A lot of times people just think, like, you watch the shows, flip this house, you buy a house, you give them 100 grand, you come back and you make 50 G's. But if the contractor knows you're not engaged and you're not watching, they're going to take advantage of you whether you like it or not. And whether it's intentional or they're just like, yeah, I'm going to bill you for 5 guys this week, and there might have been 1 guy there. Again, we know investors that invest all over the country that have cameras at every one of their properties and watch people coming in and out. And that's one way to do it. Not necessarily a way to keep a contractor long-term, but you know, it is one way to do it.
Well, but I mean, and I guess like 2 examples on this. One, a guy that we have helped flip 20, 30 homes over
Part-time.
6 years part-time. He's an IT guy, but he's been doing 3 to 4 a year. He just did one in North Arlington or South Arlington, and it took him, and by the way, he now owns a construction company because he did so many deals that he's like, okay, I'll just partner with a crew and open my own construction company. He does jobs for homeowners and he's doing his own flip. Well, it was a very straightforward 3-level colonial renovation, 1,100 square feet taxable plus a basement, 1,500 square feet total, you know, in South Arlington. And it was supposed to be 4 months, and it was supposed to be $100,000 to $110,000. And by the way, he is a contractor who has his general contracting license A, right? Class A license. It ended up taking him 9 months. He lives in Leesburg. He never once came to the job, never once checked on anything. And instead of it being $100,000 to $110,000, it was $170,000. He ended up losing $80,000 on the flip because it took him twice as long and almost cost him twice as much. And he's wondering, like, what's going on? I'm like, dude, like, your job is to do this.
What we identify by going there frequently towards the middle to the end of the project is that the contractor was billing him for 5 workers per week, right, on a salary essentially. But what they had there was like 2 to 3 workers and a couple of teenagers or kids that were there kind of cleaning up, right? And so essentially there was very little work getting done on a weekly basis, but he was billing him on a weekly basis for 5 guys at $250 a day or whatever it was. So ultimately they were stretching the timeline and nickel and diming the labor by having very, I would say, unskilled and underqualified children working on the job, but billing them for it. But because they weren't there on site, they couldn't really.
They weren't expected.
They couldn't catch it until the bill came at the end, and they were 70 grand over budget.
Yep.
And the quality control was not good at all.
We walked into this powder room under the stairs, and you know, the toilet is here, and the slope under the stairs starts. I'm talking where the top of the toilet starts. So like, if a male is urinating, you're standing as far back as you can to get a little headroom and try to shoot in. And he's just like, bro, he's like, is this bad? I'm like, this is not good. We got to redo this bathroom and start over.
It's not good.
And it was just like, again, he wasn't there. So this is, you know, you can save thousands of dollars doing this. And had he not fixed that though, like, that would have precluded a lot of people from buying it. So it's not just a matter of, oh, it's going to cost you $5,000 to fix this. This house is not going to sell because of this, most likely, because a buyer is going to think this is going to be 20 grand or 30 grand or whatever. So
well, at that point, they know you didn't pull permits because it's not code. Code is 6, 8, and 30 inches, right?
Yeah.
Same thing in this Arlington home. They unfortunately lost money, but the quality of work was so poor that it sold for about 60 to 70K below what the market should have bared. But the finishing details, the attention to detail was not good, and so the market saw that. So if they see that your toilet's not the code, or your shower's not the code, then they start to think, what else did you cut corners on? And then they automatically assume you didn't pull permits. So when even if you're lucky enough to sell, when you get to the home inspection, it's a show, because now they're bringing in subcontractors, inspectors, master electricians to see what else you didn't do. So first impression is everything. So not only does that hit you at 5 or 10% on the actual sales price, but it costs you a lot more money during the process as well, not including the appraisal. Obviously, you have to appraise as well.
Yep.
So again, going back to, if you're going to do this, either you personally need to be on the job site, or you need to have someone, a foreman, a superintendent, someone that works for you part-time to be there. Yes.
Okay, so.
You ready to leave? Like, I came here for rainbows and unicorns, and I'm out.
There's a lot, but I'm but, okay, so here it is. There is a property overseas, and it's a family property that has been vacant for probably like 50 years. So here it is. My family are in the process of renovating it, like restoring it. So the conversation is, okay, somebody's gonna have to be there to make sure everything is going to plan, and the lead of it is like, no, they're not going.
Right.
And, gosh, the amount of money that has been spent on it is just ridiculous. And then the questionable aspects of it, like you can't trust anybody, and it turns out that this amount of money was supposed to be going to one thing, and suddenly everything is missing, and it's like, but wait, what's going on here? So like hearing that just really solidifies
And
how important it is to
does-
just be there
Do any of the family members live close? Does anybody live nearby?
in the at the property. in the
Or
international-
nearby? Yeah, where's the home?
Yeah.
Look at it.
Oh, it's in West Africa.
Okay, yeah. Just any family close by at all?
Well, I actually, no.
No.
They're
And
like
it's hard.
3 days trip away from the property, and
It's hard.
We can't get someone to come 30 minutes away, so
gosh.
I can't imagine a 3-day trip.
it's been so frustrating. And it's like, look, it's gonna have to happen. Like, if you want the property taken care of,
Someone has to be
somebody's
there.
gonna have to go.
Put
You
some
have to
eyes
go.
on it.
Live there, work there, rent a place nearby.
Oh my gosh, how do you?
Well,
How do you?
how do you do it?
Yeah.
We-
Like,
honestly,
how
we-
do you convince somebody?
Honestly, we don't do that, to be
Oh
honest with
my
you.
gosh,
I just spent 2 weeks in Europe, and I found a lot of great deals, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of tempting, but I know what I know, and I just did a renovation 2 hours away. It's a $300,000 renovation. My resources were stretched so thin, and it was so stressful to get people to go across the Bay Bridge back and forth, that it was not only longer, but more stressful, more time, and ultimately more expensive. So I would not tackle that renovation personally, because we've done so many that we know you could spend 2 years doing that and maybe go 100% over or double budget.
It's been that. So yeah.
So
Oh my gosh.
we don't have the secret sauce. Anybody else has an experience to share other than
Yeah,
putting
that's
cameras
tough.
there? It's tough. I mean,
Maybe.
drop Nest cams, drop cameras so that you can kind of keep a virtual eye on it. But we've also had it where contractors on this particular house put T-shirts or hats over the camera,
Yes.
so you can't see. They're like, oh, that just accidentally happened 4 days in a row, right? So
Yeah.
it's hard to control. So then you have to fly over there and
Just,
yeah. So
Yeah, that's, I don't envy you in that situation. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah.
but
sorry to hear that. Only other idea would be to find a local realtor and/or general contractor who's boots on the ground and partner up with them on that. Maybe do some sort of
Incentivize somebody to
incentivize
help.
them to be boots on the ground. But you have to trust them, right? That's the trust
that's
factor.
the part,
Yeah.
the trust.
Yeah.
Or you just work remote and go hang out there for a couple of
I
months.
mean, that might just be it.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I think it's about to fall on me. 'Cause
yeah,
You can see it happening.
I can see it. I can
Yeah.
see it. Oh.
that's a tough situation. Sorry going through that.
And then step 3, get the look. So renovate to the upper middle end
By
of
the way,
your target
that
market.
bathroom was Sean's father's design.
Based on, yeah, right.
Brown on brown on brown.
Based on the comps. So I think that's one thing though that, like, you know, right, the fanciest features and highest end finishes don't necessarily justify the cost. And that's true, right? Like it's one thing if you're doing it for your home and for yourself and it's not an investment. Aside from that, when it comes down to an actual like ROI, like what sells, what's working, right? We know this tile, these vanities, this frameless shower door, this type of stuff. Yeah, could you do heated floors? Yep, cool. Do you need to? Nope. I mean, you don't have to in terms of a flip. I don't know that we've ever done heated floors in a flip, to be honest with you, right? Like there's certain bells and whistles that you can certainly forego that are not going to necessarily get you a return on investment. And I think that's one thing that's important. You don't want to be that high end. You certainly don't want to be the low end, but that upper, that middle to upper is where you want to be hitting. And then again, number 2, right? Keep it neutral and generally on trend. Don't get too creative. Let's not recreate the wheel. It's until we know that this doesn't sell anymore, we're gonna keep doing this, right? Like, I think that's where creative liberty, it's great. We have a interior designer that wants to start flipping houses and doing her own things, and she has grandiose ideas, and it may or may not work, but she's going to be able to do one a year based on what I've seen in terms of how she is going to approach this process. Unless you can rinse and repeat, you are going to be getting your own way, and again, let the market dictate what the market's doing. You can look on Houzz, Pinterest, HGTV. Again, start walking new construction homes. It's not that hard to find out what people are doing, and we're not gonna be those people that are gonna be this trendsetter that says, oh, look what I did over here, and by the way, what does that mean? Okay, cool. That's not gonna get you any more money. That might be your own little boom, my uncle's an architect and he wants to put his stamp on everything. There's a reason he foreclosed on one of his houses because he made it way too unique and no one wanted to buy it. And it was just one of those things where you're let's not get too creative here and just make sure that it hits for the masses. We are selling to the masses. Until you become a custom home builder that are selling to the 1% or the 5% or whatever percent it is, let them hire you and pay you to do that. But until then, play to the 80%.
Well, that's the difference between custom and spec. So custom is getting hired by an owner to build a custom home or do a custom renovation. A spec is we're building a house, designing a house, flipping a house, expanding a house to appeal to the masses. So when you're going custom, a client has hired you and said, this is exactly what I want in my home. And that is a different type of renovation. That's typically 30 to 40% more than what we do. The call that we have after this is a coach that we hired, we mentioned earlier, that has 60 projects going on right now in Seattle. They have 4 packages. And they do projects from 500,000 to 5 million. And at each price point and each zip code, kind of like we do, but at scale, they have different packages. No, until that package stops selling, we're going to continue to do it again and again. I've been at this for a decade and done a couple hundred of these. Sometimes I get bored with my own finishes. Riley sees our houses and they're cool, but they all look the same. We've got to a point where we have 3 packages, depends on price point and zip code, and it makes us so much more efficient. It saves me 5, 10, 15 hours a week by doing that. And until the buyers start giving us feedback at the open houses or at the showings that they don't like these finishes, why would we reinvent the wheel? And by the way, we buy 10 houses at a time now at scale at a discount to save 20%, and we inventory everything, so that picks up efficiencies and cost. And again, at some point, the trend's gonna change out from under us. We might get caught holding 2 houses worth of light fixtures and knobs and hardware, but we're gonna save so much time and money in between that we're willing to take that risk. Basically just going back to design to the comps, lean on your realtor if you don't know what the comps will bear, and just make sure you don't over design. Again, you're not trying to set the record, you're not trying to get 100,000 likes on your project. You're trying to turn a profit, essentially.
Yep. And then number 3, features and finishes worth considering. Nude railings with iron balusters, patterned carpet, shapes and colors, instead of cheap plush, We've kind of already hit on that, right? Again, new railings. What people are doing, either the iron rod, right? Modern railing, or they're doing now with the wood on top and then the metal railing in between. It's just a matter of figuring out what's going on.
By the way, that's $80 to $120 a linear foot. If you guys are curious, what rails cost. So if you see a rail on a staircase, it's probably $1,000 to $1,500. If you see it on a front porch, you're looking at $2,000 or $3,000. But basically, there's plenty of companies here that fabricate and make metal rails, and they're about $100 per linear foot. So if you're going to a house, it's something most people underestimate. We spend an average of $4,000 to $6,000 on rails per project, and if you're just walking into the house, you might think $1,500.
And number 4, stage. That's one thing that I would say people overlook all the time. They always ask us, do we need a stage? We have done, again, 300 or so flips and builds since 2008. From the Great Recession to the hottest market we've ever seen, to COVID, to now. We have staged every single property we've ever done. Good, bad, neutral markets. You know why? Because 99.9% of people start their search online. Your photos are going to capture them, and people do not know how to visualize space. Spatial planning is super important, and if you can't budget $3,000 to $4,000 for staging, then it probably wasn't a good enough deal to buy in the first place, to be honest with you. And it's very hard to say that, okay, I put $4,000 in a staging, so I got 20 grand more. You can't, it's impossible to prove, but staged homes sell much quicker and tend to hit a higher price point. And we do that regardless of the market, and we will continue to do that regardless of the market, because it really just it makes it feel like a model home. Every new build, if they're building a community or whatever, they are staging that model home to the T, right? Like everything is done. So we kind of take that approach.
And a secondary benefit to that is people walk into a 1940s row home that's completely renovated and they expect it to be new. That's just the expectation, because the photos are so good now, the videos are so good, right? And if it's not staged, they start to see little imperfections. So they're going to compare that $1940 million Rambler to the $2 million new construction home, because the photos look the same, the finishes look the same. So what we've learned is if you stage it, you're not trying to hide anything, but you're distracting the eye from that slightly unlevel floor or the tile that's a 1/4 inch out because the house was that way for the last 60 years. The plaster that might have a crack in the corner, or the 2-prong versus a 3-prong outlet. Those little details, when it's staged, it gives that great first impression, and people fall in love with the lifestyle, versus if you just show them a square box that's 80 years old and renovated, they're going to pick apart every little corner. And again, we're not trying to trick anybody, but at the end of the day, like, you're selling a lifestyle, you're selling a home, and that staging helps in a variety of ways. So there hasn't been a single house we've ever done we haven't staged. We get pushback from our investors and our builders to not stage. And I'd say 99% of the time, we win that conversation because we can show them historically we've staged every single one of our homes. And so why would we have spent $500,000 on staging if we didn't see the value in it?
Yeah.
But it's a lot of things most investors will cut corners on that cost you a lot more money.
Yeah. Sometimes the best deals are the ones that you sell pre-market, right? As a seller, if you get someone that's interested, especially when supply is constrained as it is, you can name your price, terms, and timing, and if somebody gives that to you, then maybe it's not worth testing the market, right? Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, we're going to go to market unless we truly get an offer that we can't refuse, but we really want to overturn every stone and see what's out there and make sure we employ these strategies, because you never know what somebody might give you. And we had a house that we were planning to go on the market at 1.45 back in February, right next to the East Falls Church Metro in North Arlington. We had somebody that gave us $1.7 million right after the missing middle was passed, and
they came in
it
at
was
1.6.
$250,000 more than what we were going to go on at, so we took it.
They came in at 1.6. We countered at 1.7, thinking they would say no, and then 24 hours later, they came back at 1.65. We counted at 1.7. They signed off. Mm-hmm. So we actually had 2 offers pre-market, pre-construction before it's done at 1.45 and 1.475 from friends of ours that are in the industry. And we were kind of considering taking that offer because it was a pretty good deal. But ultimately, if you're investing, you should have a number, work with your realtor, and know right when you get to market, or like 2 weeks out, what is the number you would take? And then you just have to hold that number, because it's easy to say this is my number, but when you have a number that's 25 grand, like close to that, you start to waver a little bit. We save 2 months closing costs, you don't have to stage, but also ultimately just like hold the line. And if you get the number, you don't test the market. If you don't, you roll the dice. And that's made us 150 grand. It's also cost us 100 grand sometimes. But it's a law of averages, and you got to be able to like have that number, hold the line, and test the market. Because ultimately the market's the true indicator of value.
Oh, totally. And sometimes the hardest part is when you name that and you get that immediately and you're like,
should have bumped it.
Should I hold out for more? Like, do I actually want to take this? Like, you know? And I think that's where it's like, it becomes a gut reaction, right? Like, what are we going to do? Like, you should be reading the market, and I think that's where it comes to number 2 here, right? Like, use an agent, but there should be like an extra parentheses here. Use an agent that knows what they're doing, right? Not all agents are created equal, just like not all contractors are created equal, not all surgeons are created equal, not all lawyers are created equal. You know what? Like, they just came out with a stat. 80% of agents licensed this year have sold 4 houses or less. 4 houses. How much do they know about what's going on in the market? Honestly, like, that seems like a part-time job to me. You know, we're very fortunate, like with our team, and we're very blessed. Like, we've helped 117 families halfway through the year buy and sell in Northern Virginia. And like, we truly have our pulse, our fingers on the pulse of the market. We know what's going on, we know what sells, we know what's working. We're not the only ones that do that, right? There are others out there that know the market like we do. I would say that I would put us up there against anybody, but I think working with somebody that truly knows what they're doing, that, one quick example, we were in the Bahamas with Stephen Papa George, and we were hanging out at the Atlantis for spring break last year. We got an offer. We put a house on the market that we helped him flip in Burke. We went on at 850. We said we probably, if we go on at 850, it should get bid up to 950.
We should have bought the house, by the way.
We should have
sold it to him because he's a friend. We got him a great deal.
We should have bought it. For the record, we should have bought everything. But anyway, we got an offer. 72 hours on the market first weekend. We're all hanging out on the beach. First offer came up to $1 million. We were on at 850, waiving everything, closing 3 weeks. We're having drinks, and I said, hey, if we can get you an extra $50,000, would you be willing to kind of split that with us in a way? And he goes, sure. You don't think we should just take the $1 million? I'm like, based on my conversations, I'm pretty sure we can squeeze some more money out of them. I don't know, but like, there's no harm in asking, and if we structure this correctly, you could make quite a bit more money. We went back. Within 3 hours, they bumped it up to $1.05 million. He made an extra $50,000 off of a 2-hour conversation. Most agents are just gonna sign off on that and be like, dude, I got a sale, I'm good, we're all happy. So like, again, not to like toot our own horn, but like knowing the market, knowing how to play the game definitely makes a difference. And I think that that's something that I would definitely, is a big piece of your team.
Yeah, and also working with an agent who's investor friendly, right? Like, there's a lot of great realtors out there that don't necessarily dive deep into investments, building, additions, construction. So working with an agent who understands investing, who understands the nuances, the timing, the cost, the structure, how to approach it, where to spend money, where not to spend money, where to go big, where to kind of pull back a little bit, where to push the price, when not. That's, you know, it's an art and a science, but just aligning yourself with agents that know and are investor friendly goes a long way.
Yeah.
We have a friend and an agent that just moved to Austin, and he's looking to do the same thing there, and he's looking around a lot of the top agents, and he's like, where do I find wholesales? Where do I find investor-friendly agents? Like, it's just not the same. And so there's a lot of great realtors that don't necessarily enjoy or have taken the time to learn this side of the business. So just be careful when you're having them run comps for you, I think is what Sean's saying, is making sure they know exactly the ins and outs of that market.
Oh, totally. And I think that brings us into point number 3, right? Price it to sell. Every seller's greedy. Ourselves.
Especially this one.
Yeah, right. Every seller is greedy, and sometimes they get in their own way. My house is worth X. Okay? Well, if your house is worth X and we price it at Y below X, the market should take us to X, right? The market's the true indicator of value. People, especially in a hot market like we have been in since COVID, if you overprice your home, you are shooting yourself in the foot like you couldn't even imagine. You are losing so much money, it's not even funny. And this is saying, oh, the difference between $499 and $515. I'm talking people are like going on at like, okay, I've got one right now, $1,085,000. I told them to go on at $999. If they went on at $999, they might have got 1.1. We're on $1,085,000 and we're sitting praying for offers, and we're getting offers at $975. Like, the market will carry you where it needs to go, especially if you have the product that is right. And you know, there's nothing out there. Like, that's the thing that people, and everyone's like, well, what? The schools of thought are, again, it's an abundance mentality or a scarcity mentality. You're either scared or you're like, you know what? This is actually gonna work. And it's gonna be what it's gonna be. And by the way, if I went on at $515, anyone that came through the home at $515 would come through at $499. That inverse is not necessarily true. And it's like the market's gonna take us where the market's gonna take us. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't really think about. Like, pricing is way more of an art than it is a science. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, and you don't get a second chance at a first impression. That's a fact. And you know what? If you are not sold within the first week, in today's market, you've either missed the mark or you need to stay there for a month, and you still might get some decent offers, but you're not going to get a bidding war. If you don't get a bidding war after the first weekend, you ain't getting a bidding war. That's a fact. So like, we are in like one of the hottest markets we've ever been in. So don't like overshoot it and be like, have the mindset of, if I don't get this, well then I'll be able to come down a little bit, or I'll be able to negotiate and still get to my number. Go to your number or slightly below it and let the market take you above your number. I mean, it's as easy as that.
And at the end of the day, if you get a full, so a lot of the objections to that as an investor and a homeowner is, well, what if I go on at $1 million and I get $1 million the first day? What happens then? Don't take it, right? So a lot of people think just because you get a full price offer, sellers are of the mindset that they have to legally accept that because they put their terms out there. You don't have to take it. You can ride it out for 10 days, 14 days and hope for that bidding war to come. It may not. But ultimately, like, there is a little bit of a leap of faith in this market to kind of, even us as an investor and an agent, you have, like, we put a house out there at 900 knowing that we want $1 million for it. You hope you get it. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. But just because you get that full price offer, or even offer 25 grand above your ask price, doesn't mean you actually have to accept it. But a lot of sellers don't have that knowledge or that experience. So like, again, that's where you have to kind of look at the numbers and make that decision. But going back to it, do not overprice your product. Because again, keep in mind when you're investing, whether you're holding or you're flipping or you're building or you're developing, you have carry costs. So what we also tell our sellers in the consultations, if you're living in this home and your mortgage is $4,000 a month, I get it. I have a mortgage too, but where else are you gonna live, right? If you move out of this home, you're gonna live somewhere. Now, if you're sitting on 9 vacant homes, which we are currently, that are under construction, our mortgages are 40, 45 grand a month. So when you're sitting there and that $15,000 delta and your mortgage might be $5,000 a month, it is a numbers game, right? It's purely math, there's no emotion. Whereas you're living there, a seller can afford to take that risk. They can afford to hang out there for 90 days sometimes for very unique property. If you're an investor, not only are you paying your $5,000 mortgage, you've got $400 utilities, you've got $1,000 for staging, you've got $300 for landscaping. It's a $7,500 carry. So that $15,000 you think you're gaining by jumping the price 3%, you're gonna eat up very quickly. And what a lot of investors don't think about is opportunity costs. So if I have $200,000 parked in project A that hasn't sold, and I wanna get it into project B, I can't move it until it sells. That might cost me a $100,000 potential profit because I'm being stubborn on $10,000 over here, because I can't afford to do that next project until I free up my money here. We had this conversation Sunday night with a longtime client of ours. Sold them a house for $475,000. They put $375,000 addition into it. We underwrote the job or their project at $999,000. They wanted to push the price to $1,075,000. The market actually justified that. The lot in the neighborhood did not. We sat on the market for 3 weeks. Fortunately, we got an offer. We negotiated 2% below ask. Did not get a bidding war. They wanted to counter 5% back, but ultimately they have 2 other jobs they're going to build and they need this cash to break ground. And so we kind of just did that math for them very quickly. And they're like, you're right. Let's not step over pennies to get or dollars to get the pennies. Let's take the offer and move on. And so for them, it's a 2-week close. It's just, you know, when you're investing, it's a numbers game. And so you need to know your carry costs. You need to know your all-in costs so that you can do that math.
Yeah.
So going back to, you know, don't step over pennies to get, or dollars to get the pennies.
And to that point, this is the last point of the night. If you have to cut price, go to the next band, right? It's all about, like, if you think about it, everybody starts searching online. They're pretty much in $25,000 increments. 625, 650, 675, 7. So we tend to price our homes at 624.9, 599.9, right? Just right under whatever threshold it is. And people think that, oh, well, I've been on the market for 3 weeks at 625. Let me cut it to 615. That is not going to move the needle at all. You know, like, get down to that next threshold and move the home. And I'm going to let Corey handle this while
But I'll show you the after photos and I'll walk you through the numbers real quick, because we did do a training here 2 months ago at this house and we walked through the scope of work and budget. So I told you guys we'd open the books up on this one. Let's see. I think it's just a KW United Wi-Fi, Sheila. Where's David when we need him?
There you go.
There we go.
I told you.
So this is a 2-level Rambler. We ended up finishing out the attic. It's right around 2,000 square feet, including the attic. So we bought this for $565 all in. again, we were underwriting it at 875 to 899, being super conservative. There was comps at the time that showed us 950 to 975. But going back to Sean's point earlier, this was in October when nothing was selling. Inventory was climbing to 3 months from 2 weeks, and nobody knew what the spring market was going to bring. So we said, all right, we're going to underwrite this with a 10% depreciation. So we took it from 950 to 875. We thought this house would cost us 150 to 170. We bumped the construction at 200. And normally, we were, for the last 5 years, we were saying our houses on average are on the market for 2 weeks. We said it's going to be on the market for 3 months. So we basically padded every metric we possibly could and still underwrote it to where we'd make at least $80,000 to $100,000 profit on the project. And we did that on every single offer we made the second, I guess the Q3 and Q4 of last year for the most part. So we bought the house for $565. We ended up putting just shy of $200,000 into it. So our hard costs were $765. With carry costs, closing costs, commissions, we ended up being a little over $850 all in staging, which just cost us about $4,500 to stage the house. As you can see, we staged every room, which we could have saved $2,000 by staging part of the house. And we sold it for $1,075,000, and we went on the market for $950,000 again, which is a calculated risk, right? We had 60 groups through the open houses and showings, ended up with the 6 offers, leveraged them up from $1,025,000 to $1,075,000. And this project made us $205,000 net profit. So this is one of the better interior projects we've done over the last 5 years from a net. It's hard to break $200,000 profit on an interior. Normally when we hit those numbers, we're doing an addition or a new build. But this is one of those ones that everything kind of fell into place. The market got better. The days on market shrunk. We bought it right, and we bought it conservatively. And the seller was thrilled to have it because they were going into assisted living. They needed the cash in 2 weeks. They didn't have any time to wait. They couldn't go to market because they were essentially in a hospital bed, incapacitated with oxygen, and the house needed work. So we solved the need, and we made about a cash on cash return. We made over 100%, and the all in we made about a 35% return. But for those of you that made it that day, I told you we'd go over the numbers. That's the finished product that just sold. And so just to kind of show you, and these are finishes that we put out. It's basically, we call it the pure white matte black scheme. There's some variations in there, but anywhere between 900 and 1.3 million, this is kind of our finished package in Arlington and Alexandria. As we get into other zip codes, we have other packages. But this is what Sean's dad is tired of seeing, but this is what's playing right now. And this is
until we stop selling.
When we put out this particular product, we've been getting anywhere from 5 to 7 offers and like 5 to 8% above ask. So we're not going to change that model until it doesn't work anymore. And by the way, we have every single one of these finishes inventoried, scanned, barcoded in our storage unit. So we know exactly what we have, and when we're ready for it, we just pick it up, roll it over, and it's there. And we buy all this stuff from Amazon. So let's open it up for questions. We just wanted to show you some of the stuff we talked about, and now we're actually implementing it.
And we are a little over time, so we can obviously hang out for a little bit here, but we want to be able to network, and if there's any questions, let us know. Sheila, what time do we have the room until?
7.
If needed. All right, sweet. Does anybody have any questions before we break for networking?
So would you say that your costs per square foot is about 70 to 80 bucks? Is that what I'm
For
gathering?
interior renovations?
Yeah.
Good question. It really depends on the house, the scope, and the out sale. For a long time, we were saying 40 to 50. Now it's somewhere from 65 to 85, depending on the price per square foot out sale and how much work it needs. So again, like if you're doing a townhouse
and stuff.
with systems, mechanicals, roofs, windows. So this is a 1-1 house. We're going to do somewhere in the middle. The house we sold for 1.7, the price per square foot was closer to 90. And if we're doing a townhouse or a $600,000 Rambler in Falls Church, Annandale, we might try to get that back to like 55 or 60. So it depends on the finishes that the market needs to hit that price. But general rule of thumb, call it 60 to 90, depending on where you're at. And that's at our cost, keep in mind, that does not include our overhead. So we got contractors in the room, Design Pro guys. I know it's hard to say for like dial it in, but what's your average price per square foot for a nice interior renovation?
You said it yourself. I think it really depends on the zip code, what things you need to update. So I can't not give you a straightforward answer right now.
Yeah.
You know, so I've seen projects that would involve just a quick even 30,000 interior remodel cost to even 100,000.
Yeah.
And depending on what you want to invest on, that can also vary your return on investment, right?
Yeah.
So that I'd say that varies from project to project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
60 to 80 bucks a square foot right now is a pretty good rule of thumb. We were going 70 to 90 for a while when prices spiked with materials. I don't know if you guys have seen this contractors, but it seems like, materials have balanced out somewhat. They're still expensive. And then labor and subcontractors seem to be more readily available now than they were 12 months ago.
Yeah, it's better right now.
Right.
It's leveled out, and it depends on the materials that you're using. Some have actually come back down,
Yep.
whereas others have continued to go up, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just don't be married to a certain product. Like if you really want hard, you go to Certainty, right? Be flexible a little bit. But 60 to 80 bucks a pop, as long as you're flexible. But yeah, if you want what you want, you might spend 125 a square foot to renovate the inside, which we used to build for 100 to 125 a square foot. Now that's 150 to 175. But generally speaking, 60 to 80 bucks, including the basement, Steve. So taxable, this one, attic, main level, and basement. Total square footage. Your basement square footage is usually a little cheaper. Good question though. Anybody else?
Well, then let's break. Yeah.
I'll
No,
just-
Yeah,
please.
sure.
I know you guys mentioned it at one point. You were saying that you guys, door knock the neighborhood for the neighbors. Just let them know. Sometimes you get found deals that way. So what is your strategy? Are you guys mostly relational? Do you guys do cold calls? Like, how do you guys generally find your deals? Like, at this point in your career? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm sure starting off to now has changed drastically.
I would say, honestly,
Great question.
all of the above, to be honest. I would say probably 70% of our deals is relational, whether like wholesalers or other agents bring us deals or like our sphere. And then the other 30%, we have a team that calls, door knocks,
Mails.
we mail, like we
$5.
we take that approach as well. So I would say 30% comes from completely cold leads and 70% comes from somebody that we know.
Or MLS. Like the two houses we bought yesterday were both on the MLS. So we're scavenging the MLS 8 to 10 times a day. Us and then two other agents on our team are constantly searching, which is hard because if you're in a listing appointment for 3 hours and then you're going to run photos, it's hard to keep up with that. But that's kind of our passion is carving for value. And then, yeah, we have agents. So we do email marketing, we do direct mail marketing, we do text messages, prospecting, door knocking, bandit signs, mailers, a little bit of everything.
But I would say 20 to 25%. So one out of, and we'll do between us and our clients 30 to 40 deals a year. I would say, a quarter of those come from on the market.
Yeah.
So like, again, that might be something that we've been tracking that's been lingering. And one that we just bought was on the market for 28 days at $650. I lowballed them and they took $580 and we bought it. And I think it's worth $8 once it's fixed up. And then another one, we saw it come on the market. We wrote an offer with an expiration quickly and we wrapped it up. So like some things we're jumping on immediately and coming in strong and hard with an expiration. And some were just like, these are our nurtures that I'll lowball the hell out of you in a month and we'll see what hits.
Yeah, we
stuff.
wrote an offer up before we walked in here for $440 in a house that was listed for $570. It's on the market. The house isn't financeable. It's not worth $570. The seller thinks it is. So we'll give them an offer that can close in 5 days. If they want it, great. If not, we'll stay in touch. And then a lot of times we have agents. So we do marketing to agents. We have relationships with agents that say like, hey, I've got a listing. I can't take it to market. It's not financeable. There's mold. It's a hoarder situation. Can you guys come check it out? Let me know what you think. So then we put on our realtor hat and our investor hat and say, yeah, I got you. So here's what we think it's going to cost to get it market ready based on our experience. Here's where we would be. And here's the value of where, like within a $10,000, $20,000 range of where we think our 10 or 20 clients would be. And 9 times out of 10, we don't buy that house. That agent brings us in as almost leverage, right? To make themselves, prove a point to the seller that you need to get it market ready. And 10% of the time, the seller's like, you know what? I don't want to go through the effort to get it market ready. I want the easy deal. Give me a 30-day rent back and you've got it. So, a lot of times agents will bring us deals pre-market. We have agents that bring us deals sometimes say, I've got a listing that's been hanging out there for 60 days. There's functional obsolescence. It won't move. Can you guys give me an offer? Again, 80% of the times it doesn't hit, but 20% of the times the seller is just ready to make a deal. And there's a lot of other sources, but there's deals out there. You just have to be digging for them constantly.
Yep.
When you're finding on-market deals, are you guys using like dual agency when you're approaching the agents, or?
Either or. So 2 houses. So the one that we bought in Arlington, grade 75. That particular agent's a top agent in the area. We've known him for a long time. He had under contract to build her for $1 million, and the builder got cold feet because the market took a dive. They were looking at a 2-4 out sale. They actually backed out during their feasibility study. They came to us at $1 million. Said, we're not going to buy it at $1 million. We think it's worth this. Offered $850. Went back and forth. Ultimately, we got it for $875 with the reduced commission on that one. That same agent brought us a deal 2 months later and said, hey, here's the deal. This is a pre-market listing, office listing. I've got a 2.5% listing agreement if I sell it pre-market. You're the first one in the door. There's 0 commission paid. If you guys want it, this number, it's yours. If not, we're taking it to market in 7 days. So sometimes they'll rep us on it. Well, we'll pay 3%. They bring us a deal. There's been situations where they rep us on it and they get the listing if it's a good enough deal. So it's really case by case, but if we're happy to have an agent rep us or sell it for us, we normally try to control the listing because we want to have control over the marketing, the feedback, the process. So we'll pay a referral fee. There's agents in our office that'll bring us to represent us on the deal, and then we'll kick them a 25 or 50% referral fee, but we kind of want to control the marketing of the listing on the back end.
But I would say less than 10% of the time are we actually getting repped on a dual agency. We're open to it if the deal is good enough.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've had that conversation. Like, I'll ask somebody, I'm like, day one it hits the market, and I'm like, this is a good deal. Hey, I'm gonna buy this house cash. Here's my terms. Can you rep me? And honestly, more often than not, they'll say, I don't do dual representation, so you can rep yourself. All right, cool. Then I guess I'll get the commission too, and here's my terms. You know,
It's just a numbers game. Like
we'll play that angle.
Yeah. We don't really care about I mean, of course we care about the commission, but at the end of the day, we have 2 businesses, the investment company and the real estate company. We used to say, okay, we're going to make $20,000 commission and we hope to make $50,000 of profit, so the collective pot is 70. And what we realized is sometimes we would force marginal deals because there's commissions on both sides. And we would think that our team or ourselves are better than we are. We're going to get we're going to convert 3 leads on that listing, right? And we had plenty of deals where we made $5,000 profit and $20,000 commission, which is not a good investment. And so now we completely separate the P&Ls. And at the end of the day, an agent can make, or a wholesaler can make a $50,000, $100,000 wholesale fee. We don't really care as long as when we underwrite the deal, it still pencils out. Yeah. We had a house in Alexandria 4 years ago, which is actually when we started wholesaling and marketing direct to seller, where the wholesaler paid $120,000 for the house.
We bought it for $250. He had it under contract for $130, so his spread was $120.
We made
and
60.
It was a family friend that he was helping out. I'm like, a family friend? You just took her for a $120,000 wholesale fee.
We made $60K on the deal. It was a good deal for us, very solid double, very easy house in Alexandria. But when we saw the HUD, we almost backed out because it made us sick. Like they had taken it.
Did they double close or?
No. He disclosed it right at the end, and we could have not closed and walked from our EMD. Yeah. We felt bad for the seller, but at the end of the day,
we still made a profit.
We made a profit, and we agreed to pay it for the price. You know, we bought it at the price that we agreed to. In our opinion, he took advantage of that seller who was elderly. But at the end of the day, that wasn't our contract. Our agreement was with the wholesaler, and so we paid the wholesale fee. He made double what we did. So the reason we started direct to seller is we were like, we can do this better. We can be more transparent. We can be more ethical.
Give a menu of options.
And the reality is the wholesaling business is a hard business, right? It's a grind, right? As you're learning, it's a grind. But there's money to be made there, but you also spend a lot of marketing dollars to get that lead. So when we first started working with wholesalers a decade ago, we're like, well, dude, they're making $100,000 a rip. We should just be doing that. But what you don't realize is you're spending $70,000 on marketing to get that $100,000 wholesale fee plus the time. So it's a whole beast in itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the end of the day, we'll buy it in a variety of ways as long as the numbers make sense. Good question though. Linda, James, anybody? You guys want to go network?
All right.
Everybody remember the Watson House?
Thank you all for coming. We will break to network, and honestly, we'll be back next month. But if anybody needs anything or has any questions, please, let us be a resource. We're happy. We are open books, so if we can help in any capacity,
In case
please
you
let
didn't
us
see
know.
that already.
Yeah, exactly.